this video, I want to talk about the very basics of what it means to be a fraction. I want to go back beyond the invert and multiply, back beyond the time when you were told to cancel, back to what the real basics of a fraction mean. When we look at a fraction, as we were taught back in elementary school, we were often given pictures of pizza pies, and we were given slices of those pizza pies, and we were told what a fraction means in relation to the picture. So let me try that. If I were to draw a circle, and I'll call that our pizza pie. Now, if I cut that in half, I now have two approximately equal slices in that pie. And we would denote that as a fraction by calling each one of those 1/2. So what does that 1/2 mean? Well, notice when I take the fraction 1/2, we call the bottom the denominator, and we call the top the numerator. Well, the word denominator comes from the same root as denomination. And when we talk about denominations, we often talk about money. For instance, if I were to talk about denominations of coins, we would talk about pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, 50-cent pieces, and maybe silver dollars. Each one of those is a denomination. And in that sense, the denomination tells us what is the unit of measure. What are we measuring here? So the 2 in the denominator tells us that to make a whole, we're talking about 2 pieces make a whole, or the number of slices in a whole are 2. If I were to talk about a pie that I cut into 4 pieces, then each one of those would be 1/4, or 1/4. Notice that fits with our idea of division being shown by a fraction as well. This is 1 whole pie divided by 4, so this is 1/4 of it. This is another fourth, another fourth, and another fourth. And if I add those up, how many do I have? I have 4/4. So the top, the numerator, which comes from the same root as number, it talks about the number of slices. So the denominator talks about the denomination, or unit of measure. The numerator is talking about the number. And I'm going to say slices because that'll help you remember that we're talking about. Okay, now, so if I was talking about 1, 2, 3 of those slices, 1, 2, 3, that would be 3 of those fourths. So we would say that's 3/4 of the pie. Now with this in mind, we can then begin to picture what's going on when we see a fraction. If I see a fraction 7/8, the first thing that I should see is I've got pies cut into 8 slices, and I'm talking about 7 of them. So let's see, 7/8, what would that look like? Well, if I picture the pie in my mind, I'll cut it into fourths, and then I'll cut those in half again, and Now I have 8, and 7 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be 7/8 of the pie. Okay. Now what happens when we get more than a whole pie? What if we need more than a whole pie? Well, let's talk about that. Let's say that we are buying pizza pies that are cut in 8ths, but I have 12 people to feed. How many pies do I need to order? Well, what I could do is say the number is 12, the units are 8ths. So I have 12 people. To feed. Pies are cut in 8 slices. So the unit of measure is 8ths. The number I need is 12. So therefore, I need 12/8. Oh, well, can I picture that in my mind? I should see then pizza pies that are cut in 8ths. And when I take all these slices, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's only 8/8. I need 4 more, don't I? So I want to order another pie, and I'll cut it into 8ths. And I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4/8. 8/8 plus 4/8 equals 12/8. And of course, 4 people can have a second slice if they like. But this tells you a little bit more about what a fraction really is, and how can I visualize that in my mind when I see these fractional numbers. I think what causes a lot of trouble is we see a fraction and we freeze. We say, what is that? If you can see it in your mind, it begins to give you the tool you need to start working with it. Now, 12/8. Somebody will say, well, you can reduce that. Well, can I reduce that? Yes, because 12/8 is really 3 times 4, and on the bottom I have 2 times 4. Mathematically, I can separate that into 2 fractions. That's 3/2 times 4/4. But what we do know that if I have a pie cut into 4 slices and I have all 4 of them, 4/4, that's a whole pie, isn't it? So that's really 1. So I can say that's really 3/2 times 1. And from the basics of math that I did for you in a previous video, you know that when you multiply something by its identity, 1, you keep the identity of the original fraction or value. So that means that that really equals 3/2. Oh, so that's the same thing as having pies cut into 2 pieces and having 3 of those halves. And as I look at that pie up there, first of all, 2 of the halves would be the first pie. And notice the second pie, I've only used half of it. That's the third half. So you begin to visualize what's going on with fractions when we are doing things, but by the way, you were probably taught that's called factoring or reducing, or in the second step you may see that's called canceling at the force. These are words we use, but they confuse students. It's better if we can visualize what it is we're doing. If you see this, you'll begin to understand fractions.